Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us tonight. For those of you who just joined, welcome. So what we'll cover today is how to create an effective UX portfolio, and then we'll do a live portfolio review panel. So we have invited some awesome guests who will really help us do that. For those of you just joining for the first time, my name is Michael, and I'm the founder of a company called BeginUX. It's a part-time UX career accelerator based on real mission-driven client projects that helps people who know UX basics transition into the field in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their jobs. And we can tell you more about that later on at the end of the event. So I don't mean this to brag or anything like that, right? Just wanted to give you guys a bit of a background for credibility purposes. So we ran many cohorts so far and helped probably over like 120 or 30 people get hired into UX roles. Here are some companies that they were hired by. So we've basically seen lots of people go through this entire UX career transition. You may have seen this diagram at our earlier events, right? We're not going to go into lots of detail about these phases, right? But basically the key point that we're trying to make is just starting with the end in mind. And when you're transitioning into UX, you want to basically UX this whole career transition and think from the standpoint of an employer. So let me just quickly give you, this is a very simple, basic roadmap, right? But you guys would be surprised because a lot of you, I'm sure, are transitioning into the field and looking to get into UX roles, or maybe you're just starting out, right? Or started recently, right? So basically, this is the simple roadmap that we use to help people become marketable and transition into the field, right? So first, just learning the essentials, right? So initial theory, basics, concepts, doing some exercises, right? And then the next big phase, that's probably the longest phase that will likely take most time, right? We call that practice and grow, right? So this consists of exercises and doing some hypothetical projects, and also ideally, and most importantly, some real experience, right? So this is where you're kind of building yourself up. So we're referring to this these couple of first steps as learning and building, right? So essentially, this is like a product analogy, right? So this is where you're learning and building yourself up, right? And after that, we move on to creating the assets, right? So just your online portfolio, resume, online presence, right? So basically packaging all your skills and experience and positioning yourself as an attractive candidate, right? And the final phase here, right, is just search, prep, and execution, right? This is where we're talking about effective job search strategy, prepare for interviewing and execution. So panelists, please turn your cameras back on. Before you guys introduce yourselves, let me just briefly explain how the portfolio review panel will work, right? And this is actually the first time we've done a few portfolio workshops, talks, etc. This is actually the first time we're doing a formal portfolio review, so bear with us. We'll try to ensure, and hopefully there are no Zoom hiccups or anything like that. So first of all, thank you to everyone who applied to have their portfolio reviewed. Obviously, there are like quite a few people, so apologies to those whose portfolio we were not able to get to. So here's how this will work. Darren will open up portfolios of a few folks who wanted to participate in this review, starting with Maggie. So we'll bring Maggie on in a second as a panelist as well, and just let her introduce herself, etc. Then Darren will kick us off with roughly 5 to 7 minutes of feedback on Maggie's portfolio. And then what will happen, he'll give remote control of his desktop to the other panelists one by one, right? Who will each review the portfolio and provide their feedback, and also roughly 5 to 7 minutes or so. And after that, the person whose portfolio we reviewed will also get a chance to ask any quick additional questions or provide quick comments, okay? And then we'll proceed to the next portfolio and so on. We'll probably review 3 portfolios or so. If we have more time, we'll maybe take another one as well. So we'd love to take as many as possible, of course. With that said, finally, I'd love for our guests to introduce themselves. So Sarah, want to get started?
Sure. Thanks, Michael. So hi, everyone. I'm Sarah. I'm a product designer and strategist. I'm currently head of design at a startup. Prior to that, I led design at Google. And before that, I was a founding designer for a startup called Benchling. And then before that, I worked at Microsoft. So I'm eager to share my experience and knowledge with you, having been on hiring panels, having designed design processes for startups and in big tech as well. So nice to meet all of you. And I actually met Michael because I also run an organization to help women of color get into product. So I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here. Darren, thank you so much for the presentation. It's good to see you. It's good to see you, Michael. Let's see. My background is in graphic design. I took the bootcamp at General Assembly. I heard that somebody in the chat has done that as well. And I was a part of the first BeginX that Michael was running, I don't know, 6 years ago now, a while back. So over the past however many years I've been in the design field, I've worked at a range of different clients, JP Morgan, MAC Cosmetics. I'm currently the Associate Experience Director at an agency based in New York City.
Awesome. We have the list of a few folks whose portfolios we'll be reviewing, and we'll start with Maggie. So
my name is Maggie Brown. I currently work as a UX designer at iCrossing, which is a digital marketing agency. I started my UX design career in 2019 when I decided that I wanted to get out of public health, where I had been for 5 years. Victoria was the first BeginX cohort, and I was the last in-person one so far in 2020. Also, hi, Darren. Hi, Victoria. They were awesome mentors during our BeginX cohort. So great to see you guys again. And yeah, that's me.
awesome. Thank you, Maggie. Good to have you here. Darren, do you want to kick us off and do the first one?
Maggie, so good to see you.
Good to
awesome.
see you too.
Loved watching your journey. And thanks for sharing your portfolio, not just with us, but everyone on this call. So thanks for putting yourself out there. I'm going to go through, just keep it go through a very high level. One of the things that Maggie does at a very start kind of immerses me, tells me where she is, so I know that she's actually not in Brooklyn, and really just tells me a little bit about her up front, that she's a UX designer and researcher, and then obviously she's based in Austin, Texas, working in product design. It just tells me short, succinct, I know where I am, and I know that I'm in the right place to be. Goes into the skills. I think skills are important where you excel at. It's good to know what the skill set, the tools and the knowledge that someone has, and kind of assessing what level that is as you're about to pull them in for an interview. Some of the things that Maggie has here is just there's like 5 lines of copy. So if there's a way to keep this really just short and succinct on a landing page, just to minimize the scroll, because I would definitely not read all of this, and it's just who I am. Software, super important. The fact that Figma, she has the big 3 here, and then InVision. Microsoft Suite, I don't think is important, nor is Google Suite. And then just how to contact her. I'm going to go into the progression app. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. That was my BeginX case study.
All right, this is wonderful. I get here, it just sets the stage for what I'm about to see. I would love to have seen a headline just right above, but I think as I go down, it's probably right here. Design mobile first for their athletes. To design mobile first app for athletes to view their AI curated fitness programs, understand data imported. So for me, it's kind of, when I get here, I always like to know what the project is, set some context, what it is that I'm about to see, and what the challenge was that Maggie had set out to do, which was to design a mobile app for athletes so that they can view their AI curated fitness programs and understand data imported from wearable sensors and communicate that back with their coaches. That's important. And then it's like I said, it's like the New York Times. I'm reading a headline like, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I'm just going to want to keep scrolling down. The team, the deliverable, and then the timeline. Timeline is pretty important. I think just knowing, I will look at something like, oh my God, you did all that in 2 months. Here, the challenge. Once again, you'll see that there's a break in color. There's different ways of doing that or defining an area. We could either do that with space. We could do that with lines. In this case, Maggie does that with color, color background, and where she's defining the challenge. How might we create a mobile app that communicates personal progress to athletes in a simple, meaningful, and actionable way? I might make that typeface a little bit bigger, just so that it's just a faster and quicker read. Interviews with athletes, going right into the research study, what it is that they did and what the questions are asking, like how do athletes track their progress? How do athletes perceive progress? And how do athletes communicate with their coaches? These are key things because I know by reading this, in my mind, I start to like take this apart and realize, oh, these are going to lead to features that Maggie's going to actually develop and bring into the app. Ticks right in. Contrast. When you have something that has a very light background, it's always good to have something, a darker background or something where that holds it and makes it stands out and actually helps you focus on. So I think that's great. The call outs are right here about what are the key takeaways from this research. Okay, great. I love that everyone's like, hey, I did a lot of research and here's pages and pages of research. The key things is what Maggie is highlighting is what the takeaway was. And that's something that's always important. It's a short, quick read. I can see that it saved time, easily to enter, reach agreements on themes, and enter important quotes. The affinity mapping. Together we define a major. And for me, I think I would have maybe pulled these out, you know, or what some of the key takeaways are. If you're going to show me this, then I also want to know what you learned from this. But I think it's great because it's enough, it's at a large enough size for me to actually read these headlines that are going across the page. And once again, you can see that Maggie has broken things down in sections. So I'm viewing one section at a time. Things are not visually competing with each other. Nice little gradients. Nice way of visually showing progress. Narrow down to 4 key findings, which I'm assuming is the takeaways from the affinity mapping. Defining the persona. It's great. It's great that you have a persona, but it's always what you learn from the persona. And I think what Maggie has done here is really important. She's narrowed down what was the key takeaways from the persona itself. The persona needed to understand why certain workouts were assigned, the distrust, an assignment when it doesn't incorporate recovery, feels powerless when he sees negative data. That is key. It's not the persona, it's what you get from understanding the exercise of creating a persona. So well done for that. Oh, this is fun. This is fun. It's playful. It's engaging. You're holding my attention. And then it also tells me that Maggie has a sense of creativity and to me is a little bit of a sense of humor here. And it's nice. It's nice to have a breakaway from some of the stagnant journeys that we typically see. Involved in client ideation. This image here kind of defines a little bit of complexity and challenges working with the client. So actually, I like that, reading into it a little bit. Developers provided feedback and feasibility to get the chose which features to design first. Usability testing with Lo-Fi prototype, use Figma to examples of findings in the dashboard. Too much data at once, want to see upcoming workouts. For me, it would have been nice if there was call outs that call this or some kind of an annotation. If these actually correlated to this, that would have been able for me to kind of process where this was in relation to this. But once again, it's focusing on one thing at a time. And I can look through this and kind of disseminate that. Ideation on data visualizations for the dashboard. For me, a little bit of notes or annotations under each one that kind of tells me a little bit about the thought process. Would have been an added bonus. Helps give me ground some context to not what you were doing, but why. Is there anything that was key differentiators or the deltas between each one, just besides a visual approach? Hand off to client, deliver presentation, and prepared a detailed report. Research from the client is happy. Offer me full-time position. Really nice, super clean. This work is really, it's just beautiful. Should we open this up, Michael?
Awesome. Yeah, this was good, Darren. Let's, to ensure we're on time, so try to give control of your screen to Sarah. Hopefully that works, since we're doing this for the first time. And Sarah can provide some feedback to Maggie as well.
Sure. I've never done the screen swap. So
yeah, I didn't even, to be honest, like I only learned about that like a few days ago, that you could actually do that in Zoom, that you could give control of your screen to.
okay, see, I have to request the remote control. All right. I'm not gonna do anything crazy, Darren. Don't worry. All right. Interesting. Okay. Cool feature. Thank you so much for sharing this, Maggie, and being the first person in the hot seat. This was a really beautiful case study to begin with, as Darren mentioned. I think you did a really great job of ensuring that the different sections are visually distinguished and having a clear, simple, type hierarchy. So I understand immediately when I'm starting in a new section. And I think particularly, to Darren's point before as well, I appreciated that you had something that sort of indicated the different types of screens and potentially the different types of UX flows that you would have to think through, which really, as a viewer, helps set expectations for what to look for as I'm scrolling through the project. One question that I definitely had immediately was like the team of 4 designers. I think it would be helpful at the end, when you talk about handoff, about who you were handing it off to, particularly if it's, vision design work, then you might be handing it off more to like a PM, or if it's to engineers, your focus might be more on, red lines or a Figma file, et cetera. So I just want to, pull that portion up. So hand off to client. So that's one question that if we were in an interview together, I'd probably ask you about that. How did you work with your team members? What parts did you own? And then what were your handoff interactions with the people that you were handing it off to? Because, Darren and Michael had also mentioned prior how important it is, of course, for designers, because we work at the nexus of so many different so many different stakeholders. So understanding that how to work with different people is really important. And I felt like the entire process was really well delineated. You didn't overwhelm it with too much type. And you also provided imagery, which helped sort of set me as I was going through the entire case study. One thing that I want to call out that I really appreciated was the detail that you showcased in your research synthesis. In particular, I think as product design as a role has grown, there's a lot of expectation as well for product designers to own research, particularly at smaller organizations where they may not have resources to hire researchers initially. And so to showcase that you are meticulous as well in that part of the process was really great. The one other thought I had is very similar to Darren, in that when it got to the portion around the usability testing and the examples of the findings, I wanted to know a little bit more about what your findings were, and then for each of these points that you gave, how you iterated and how that led to these final iterations of the data visualizations, because I think that part of the thinking process is really important in understanding how you're tying it back to the user, and then as well as the business goals for the clients. But aside from that, really strong project and a great kickoff to the portfolio review. So I'll hand it off to Victoria now.
Thank you, Sarah.
I am going to agree with everything that Darren and Sarah have said. I think this is a really great case study. I'm not going to just repeat everything they've said because I feel like they've said a lot. I did a little bit. Hold on. Okay. Hold on. Bear with me. Okay. I'm controlling somebody else's browser. So I cheated a little bit and I opened this on my own Chrome browser. So I was kind of poking around, and I actually want to go back to the very homepage. So when I'm looking at portfolios of designers, the one thing that I really look for is not only do they have the skills, do they have the experience, but also what kind of person are they? I am going to be working with you. I want to make sure that I like you as a person. Not only are you talented, not only are you asking a lot of questions, but also I really value a sense of humor. And I feel like you kind of have that throughout your portfolio and throughout your case study. And so I think it's a wonderful thing. You mentioned on the very first thing that you love dogs. And interestingly enough, on your contact page, you have a photo of a dog with you and a dog. And I just love that. I feel like that's the little detail that makes me smile, that makes me think of you as a normal human being and a friendly coworker. I'm not going to go through the case study. I'm just going to say that I really love that you have all of the case studies. Some of them are password protected. 2 of them are not. Darren mentioned earlier about NDAs, so we're all familiar about that. I also like that you have a landscape. I'm going to click on that so you guys can see it. You have landscape design, which is so above and so beyond UX, but this makes you a memorable candidate. Because I might not remember, I'm going to remember your name because I remember you from in-person BeginX. But if, as Darren mentioned, you only have a few moments to look at somebody's portfolio, you kind of want to stand out from the crowd. And I think this really helps you stand and be memorable. Not only the sense of humor, but also what your interests are outside of a professional life. Did I mention the resume? I really like that you have the resume right here. I will go back to the homepage, which is the About. Similar to Darren, the one thing I would recommend, or the one thing that it's kind of off-putting, is that you tell me that you have all of these skills, but it's kind of like, show me, don't tell me. So what I would actually recommend is you switch the About and the case studies. So this is almost like your About page, but your homepage could be the case studies themselves. And I know that we're running low on time, but yeah, I really like it. I like the sense of humor. I like that you have absolutely everything in your portfolio. There's a way to get in touch. There's a way for me to view your resume and look at your case studies.
Awesome. Thank you, Victoria. Maggie, do you have any quick questions or any comments?
Yeah, well, first off, thank you so much. It's really valuable. I had to pull this together in a week because my old portfolio got deleted. So it's really good to hear this feedback, and I definitely need to go back and kind of dust things off, especially on the homepage. But yeah, I think Victoria, you just said something about switching the About and the homepage. Can you repeat that? Yeah,
so this, now that I don't have access, so it almost feels like the skills and everything and all of the software that it doesn't really belong on the homepage. I think almost the industry standard across portfolios is like having case studies, like maybe having a picture of you, but also having either images or text boxes or whatever you want representing the case studies. So like right off the bat, I don't really need to know what software you use or what software you're familiar with. That should be visible in the case studies. So I would just recommend switching that. So like the case study is the homepage, and then the about you with the skills that you have, the software that you know, is kind of a separate thing.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Sorry, I just want to jump in really quickly because everything, Victoria, that you said reminded me of one other piece that I want to second Victoria's comment in that with your case studies, currently the only way to access them is through the dropdown. And because you do have some projects that are locked, it's unclear immediately to the user which one will send them to a password protected page. And if you pull it out to the front and provide thumbnails, you'll be able to provide a little more feedback to the user and then allow them to, so that they have an expectation of what they're going to see on the next screen.
Yeah, for sure. And a homepage should really represent what's on the site. So thank you for the feedback.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Maggie. So next up is Ade, or is it Ade or Ade? How do you pronounce your name?
It's Ade.
Ade. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. All right. There you go. Awesome.
Hey,
So
everyone.
do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Sure thing. My name is Ade. I'm currently a grad student at Northeastern. I was during my undergrad, I pursued a degree in marketing and communications, and then close to my senior year, I decided I wanted to pivot into the world of user experience and particularly product design. I saw there were a lot of transferable skills from just being a marketing analyst that I could pass on into being a product designer and a user experience designer. So that's kind of how I got into product design. Currently, I haven't had like a formal experience yet. I'm still very much in classes and just working on independent case studies. But currently, I do have a project where I'm working with a real life business. So I will be looking, it's currently more challenging than, independent case studies, but I think there's worthwhile experience in that, and is something I'm looking to further advance more as I learn to build up that case study for this project.
Awesome. Thank you for joining. So let's kick things off. Darren.
And thanks for putting yourself out there and sharing your portfolio with me and everyone else on this call right now. So I appreciate that. Should I start with the first case study? Is there one that you in particular would?
You could go with the checkup one.
The first one, okay. So just starting on this page, one of the things that I just looking at, great, you tell me your name, a former digital marketer turned product designer. I think this is something that I would save for the about page, but here, just own the fact that you're a product designer. So if this is where you are, and this is what you're embracing in your career and your path forward, then you're a product designer. And then if you want to go into the about section and tell me how you were a digital marketer, and then have those connected tissues between being a digital marketer and how that actually evolved into a product designer, wonderful, because I would love to read that story and get to know you a little bit better. So some things where the word projects I may take out. I may start to think about how might you make this page feel lighter and more inviting. And there's different ways that you can actually do that with your typography. These two typefaces are two different font families, but they're the same size. And there's just not enough hierarchy. And there's different ways that you can actually approach that. But I'm just going to jump right in. Check up auditing subscriptions and made easy, secure bank integrations. Wonderful. First thing I do when I get to this page, you're setting the stage for me for what I'm about to scroll down and see, and you're about to take me on the journey. And this is the start of your storytelling. You're telling me productivity, fintech, finance, role, duration. From this time here, instead of the dates, I might put, oh, it's less than a month. Okay. Then in this case, I might put like 3 or 5 weeks or whatever it is, or 4 weeks versus the date. That might be an easier read. The problem that you're solving. This is great. So you're sitting up front auditing subscriptions can be tedious, especially when you have some subscriptions to cater. This scenario often leads to losing money on subscriptions you weren't planning to use. I think what you're giving me a little bit of a stat here, and I think it might be, might often go where it says this scenario often leads to customers are losing money to subscriptions that they weren't planning on using or forgot that they had. That's more of the problem because you're leading with the statistics. And I think that you should really just kind of focus in on what the actual problem is. And then that is actually supported by a statistic. Also, your typeface is just a quicker read here. This is my personal preference because I'm scanning quickly. I would consider making these typefaces just, these font sizes just a little bit bigger. The intended value. I want this product make it easier for users to forgotten subscriptions. How might this represent? So this 1 and 2 are pretty important. And if there was a way to just kind of highlight that, I think that might have just a little bit more impact. Great, is showing your approach. And that's here. This is the 4 Ds plus an E. Taking me in, discover, see the problems. Below are a few questions. And once again, so this right here is larger, but the real focus is on the question itself. So this question ties with this metrics. So for that reason, I would have actually put more emphasis visually on the question. So I would have seen bigger title, look what this is, see the metrics, and then I would have scrolled down. Any great minor description. One of the other things that I might consider is just adding a little bit more space between these categories so that as I'm moving from this section and then going into your field research, I might add a little bit more space, a little bit more padding above and below so that you give me a visual break between what I just saw and then the information that I'm about to read as I'm going into this next section. The fact that these are so close together that they have visual tension, and you want me actually is to be able to have like a slight pause as I'm moving through. It's a lot of great information here. So I have some more feedback, but I'll save it towards the end. But while we're just here, it's the same thing. It's and just as we just saw in Maggie's thing, it's really the fact that you have a persona. I think it's less about their personality, humor, empathy, and their favorite subscriptions. Unless the subscriptions actually relate. So if these subscriptions relate to your app, which it seems that they do, clear over subscriptions, then I think how do you actually disseminate that? So that's just a quick read. So what is the key takeaway from what you learned about Davis? And is there a way to make this more succinct? Because one of the things that someone is doing as they're moving down the page is time. And then there's the cognitive lift. So cognitive lift is the time it takes me to look at something, read something, and process information to understand what it is that I'm looking at. And so a cognitive load, right, that all equates to time. So the time that it takes me to start, move through your experience, be able to focus on these key moments as I'm moving down, each equate to time. And so I think time is an investment. It's a digital currency. So you're asked how much currency, which is time, that you want me to actually spend. And what is the quickest way that I can look through all this, find what the impact, so it's less about what you did in this, and what are the key takeaways and what are the key learnings that I could actually find as I'm moving down this section. And some of that is broken down into the smaller text. And I think that I would have taken some of this and actually turned that into your headline instead. Before usability and accessibility checks, observing user feedback. So is this like a heuristics? Oh, this is your prototype. This is your prototype here?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was just reading the before, after. So this is the before, and then this is the after.
Yeah, after engaging the users with like the wireframe just to see how they maneuver through the workflow of the app.
So I think that this is great here. I don't know if all of this was necessary because it seems like you're repeating some of this content, right? And the key thing is, once again, I'm a big fan of annotations, where if there's like little call outs that so that you can actually have me hone in and go like, we added this date tile or this overlay for users to interact in a certain way, so that there's more, you're adding more contextual information to the screens that I'm looking at. And then I can understand what exactly that you were solving for and some of the impact that you had more specifically on the screen. Otherwise, I'm just looking at the general screen and then I'm having to read this. So if you add a little bit of annotations, that helps with a little bit of wayfinding as I'm moving down. Let me just get through this. I have some questions, and I know that I'm short on time. So my key question to you is, a lot of this is research driven, and everything that we do as product design should be informed. So it's what I refer to as informed decision making, right? You clearly have that, and you clearly surface that everything that you've done is based on some research and findings. I love where you start to think about, the journey and going through this. I would have found another way to, or maybe not have the background. That's just my preference. But I think as a product designer, what you want to be able to do is really start to surface in on that. And at the top, and this is just my personal preference, this is very like top heavy research. And where you start to get into the product design is more way towards the bottom. I spent a lot of time going through and scrolling. Great, this is informed decision-making, but for me, I would have made this a little bit more succinct, or I would have put the supporting research more towards the bottom and actually maybe have flipped that, where you start to really get me in and get me immersed in you as a product designer, and then how I got there and what supported my decision-making. You can give a little bit up top, and then more of the details could be more towards the bottom. But I'm going to turn this over to someone else. Nice work. It's really thorough. You have a lot of information here. You have all the right ingredients. And it's off to a really nice start. So kudos to you in making the career change.
Thank you for sharing your portfolio, Ade. It's extremely clear immediately. I'm going to go back to the, if I can scroll. Okay, it's just taking a little bit. Yeah, I mean, I really appreciated your homepage. It was immediately clear to me what the story you were trying to tell me was. I understood very quickly what your resume is without having to go to your resume or your LinkedIn, because you provide a bit of a summary. And then immediately I have access before I even have to scroll beneath the fold to access your projects. So once we go into the case study, I agree with a lot of Darren's comments about the amount of information that you've provided. I have a very deep understanding now of what your thinking process is, and what I would recommend in terms of curating it more for your viewer is to think about, in an interview, in an on-site portfolio review, for instance, if you're given, let's say you have 5 to 7 minutes to speak about this project, what are the things that you want to highlight? What are the skill sets that you really want to showcase in this project? Because I saw that you have about 3 projects, right? I imagine that for each of these projects, there may be different skill sets that you're showcasing. And as a result, which ones are the strongest in this one? So you have, for instance, a lot of research here. I think that could be condensed, as Darren said, because I'm getting a really deep understanding of what your thinking process is, but perhaps the most useful pieces would be the questions that you're asking yourself and the questions that you're asking your users, combined with the visuals that you've provided. I think as well that it's taking a while to scroll. But with the design iteration process, I do appreciate being able to see the differences between, your analog work versus your digital. And then additionally, that you really go into a deeper dive of the different solutions that you thought about and why. Similar to Darren's comment about just the amount of scroll it takes, I imagine that there is a way for you to condense these 5 solutions down into something that is consumable in just a few scrolls or even in just one image. And then that would tell a full story for the viewer, and particularly for recruiters who really only have a few minutes with each portfolio. I think understanding the full story immediately is something that you want to try and aim for the portfolio. And then the last thing I wanted to call out is that I do really appreciate that you have this "what did I learn" portion at the end. One of the questions that I think someone had asked is about academic research and how do you highlight results. I want to also say that I think for a lot of interviewers, we recognize that you're just starting out. We recognize that you may not have access to quantitative, analytics teams, et cetera. And so a big part of what we're also looking for is, what did you learn about your own process? What are the things that you learned personally? And so, at least for myself, when I encounter early career graduates or career switchers, that's what I'm looking for: the ability to introspect and then to iterate on your own process and on the project itself. And so if you're able to call that out, that's also really powerful. Yeah, that's all my feedback. So I'll hand it off to Victoria.
Over time, thank you. So I'm going to go over everything that you have in your portfolio, because while Sarah and Darren were talking, I took a look at all of the pages. So first things first, I actually really when you joined us here on the panel, the first question that Michael asked you is how to pronounce your name. And interestingly enough, you have it right here in your About page. I would actually recommend that you just put it on your home page. I've seen other designers have that just below their name, so that could help you out. With what Darren have mentioned regarding the digital marketer, I would actually just add a line right here. I used to be a digital marketer and I'm currently a student at I really like the breadth of research in all of your case studies. They are so thorough, so exceptional. It seems that you've seriously put a lot of effort and a lot of time into them, and it's quite visible. I took a look at both these 2 projects right here because they are the case studies. The project on the bottom is an animated poster, so I'm not going to click on that, but I'm going to open this one right here. It's full of a lot of different information, and I just loved reading through it and thinking of your thought process. It seemed like you've put in, again, so much effort into it, and it's quite visible. I do agree with Darren regarding kind of having some sort of division between the sections, because right now there's images, there's copy, is a little bit overwhelming. I will also call out the fact that a lot of these, and I don't know if these are like slides or screenshots, but there's a lot of instances of images having text, and it's really poor because when I resize it and imagine that I'm opening it out on my mobile device, it's impossible to read. And also some of the text kind of gets lost because it's like goes to the right-hand side. So just be mindful of that. But otherwise, yeah, I think this is fantastic. There's just so much passion put into all of them. I will say just one thing. I know that I'm running low on time. On this project, there were a few personas that you've created. And again, what Darren said and what Sarah mentioned about personas and the drivers that they have, the problems that they have is really like the fundamental, the most important thing why we have personas. Just be mindful, you and anyone else in the audience, be mindful of creating personas based on actual people. The whole idea is that you create these imaginary personas so that you can solve the problem for this imaginary person. You don't want to solve this problem for Angelina Jolie because then we're imagining Angelina Jolie. She might not be using this product, right? You kind of want to make up a fake person. But again, this fake person needs to be based on the research, which I'm sure you have plenty of.
Thank you, Victoria. Ade, so I want to give you a chance before we move on to the next portfolio. I want to give you a chance to ask any additional quick questions or comments.
Yeah, I think a lot of the feedback does make sense. I've been looking for more ways to like condense my case studies, but I guess like I don't know when little information is too little, like to not make informed decisions. So I guess I have overcompensated by putting in too much. So I would definitely take that feedback and I just look for more ways to, I guess, reduce the information architecture and like the just visual overload for users. So I think that was one of the main things. I guess in terms of like my rationale and decision making, I know you didn't look too deep into that, but do you see an alignment from the research towards the final product?
I did. And then once again, I think if there was a way to make it more succinct and make it stand out more, and maybe instead of having titles, you actually turn some of those findings, maybe that's your headline itself. So that it's just quick, it's scannable. When I get to a section, it's defining what it is, what I'm looking at. That might be one way of approaching it. And I don't know if any of the panelists have any other suggestions.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I hear, from the question that you just asked, obviously you do have a good sense of what are the things that you learned, even just, from the way that you've laid everything out, in terms of like you understand the importance of the user in each of those sections. I had some time to read through it before. And so I would just try and pull out what your most important findings in each of those sections were. And then to Darren's point, perhaps using that as a way to structure the story that you're trying to tell.
Okay. Sounds good. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah. Ade, thank you for showcasing your portfolio. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
Awesome. So next up is Aditi and Darren. So please make Aditi a host as well. Aditi, you will be able to turn on your video after that. And by the way, a message for everyone in the audience, as you guys have these questions, I see there are a few questions accumulating in the Q&A tab. So definitely add more. And then we'll have like a more formal Q&A right after the panel review. All right. Aditi, do you want to just briefly introduce yourself?
Yes. Hi, guys. I'm Aditi Garg. I live in New Jersey. In the past, I have worked as a designer in the home and the fashion industry. Well, at the onset of COVID and the decline of the textile industry, it really got me thinking like what I will be doing next. And I guess after a lot of research, I found out that, user experience design, it actually aligned very well with my skill set, my proficiency in learning new softwares. Also, like the joy that I get out of like creating products that people use. So yeah, I guess since then I have been like, learning more in the about UX design, about the product design, and how I can contribute to the world of this technology. Yeah.
So let's kick off with Darren's review.
Hey, Aditi, thanks for being here and sharing your portfolio. I'm just going to go through this and I will try to be mindful of time. So, give the panelists enough ample time to give you feedback as well. So just starting right here, super clean layout. It's light, it's inviting, it's engaging. I think that's wonderful. My personal preference, I would consider moving this part to your My Story and start to really tell that story about where you are as an experienced designer. There is a lot of value in something that's hidden all the way towards the bottom. This is really more talking to me about your process, the way you think. And some of this should actually be elevated either where your about section is, the first thing I read, it sets the tone for, you know, who you are now. And then how you got there is this part right here. Is there a particular project you want me to click in first? The first, second, or
I can
third?
do why buy this gadgets marketplace, maybe.
This one right here?
Yeah.
Wonderful. Why buy market gas, connecting people to share not just things, but experiences. So I think this is really important, but I would kind of frame, you're telling me what this does, but I think it would be more, you know, a project to help people connect, a mobile application that connects people, or solving to find an easier way for people to share not just things, but experiences. So if you gave me a little bit of a snapshot about what this was, the take of the project, I think that might have a little bit more impact versus what the actual company is itself. So, because just keep in mind, it's not about why buy mobile. This case study is about what you did and what you were solving for. So if you can maybe just reframe that, and that might be in your problem or challenge statement, and then reword that so that it's at the top. Your project summary, there are some clear sections. There's different ways of handling this. You have, you know, moving across horizontally, or you could even just made this linear where 1, 2, 3, 4. It is a quick read, it is a quick scan. The downside is that you get more widows and jagged edges when you're have such small columns. So for that reason, I would recommend just kind of considering just putting it out as a list. That's just a thought. The sprint sketch map, nice. I like the way I'm moving down. You have clear sections, your goals, kind of sharing, cater to the efficiency. So these seem to be pretty important. And since the level of these importance, I think I might make it so that they're just maybe, can you make this image a little bit larger so that it's just easier to read? And when it's smaller and the type is smaller, then I may have a tendency just to scan past it, but it seems that there's a little bit of importance and reason to it. Love this, key findings. You just made me so happy. Most users were new to the neighborhood, so it's not about the personas, it's what you learn from the personas. So now you're my new best friend. And I think this is great. And I think this is the most important because these key findings are actually what we start to turn into feature sets, right? As we're moving into developing a product. How might we help users borrow and lend things easily and efficiently with the community? I don't know if this image is as important, but I think how might we, I think you don't need the how might we. I think I would have just made this how might we, like just one big as your title, because it has the impact, and it also sets the stage as I'm moving down the page. Sitemap, got to make it bigger because I am going to nerd out on your sitemap. Great, you have annotations, love it. This is exactly what I'm talking about. So you're helping me tell a story. Obviously, you're not in the room with me when I'm looking at your portfolio. So I have to be able to find these visual cues to help me understand what you are solving for and why you were solving for it. And having these little visual cues, these call outs are so important. I know that your CMS is a bit busted, but I get the idea of what it's meant to be. What users said, if these are important, I would have actually made them into bigger blocks, because if these are impact statements, I think then that's something that you really want to kind of hit me with. What if my item goes missing or is damaged, right? These are the things that I don't want to have to squint my eyes for. But I love the fact that you have the key learnings here, and that really synthesizes all of this information into something I should just focus on. So kudos to you for doing that. Iterations, once again, if this is something I should focus on, then you should make it bigger. Otherwise, I'm not quite sure what value it has at such a small size. ID verification, if there's something really interesting here, I would have actually made them much bigger, and then have the type section smaller, or just put it directly under the image. These are kind of things that are key focuses. I want to see what you're solving for, what the before and after. And at this smaller, the scale down size, it's harder to really get in and see the details and the impact that you're having. Other than that, I love just the way that you have enough white space around everything. I love the way that things are titled. I love that these descriptions are short and succinct. Now you're giving me a visual break and you're introducing another section, and that's great because you have this color block. The fact that you have annotation under your screens, wow, this is awesome. Learning is an outcome. So I got to say, this is fantastic. It's short, it's succinct, it's titled well. My only throwback once again is that I wish you set the stage a little bit better up top. But you ticked a lot of the boxes for me. And then some of the layouts that you have here is just quick fixes, enlarging things and laying things out a little bit differently. Just have a little bit more impact on your storytelling. I kept it short and sweet, but I'm going to kick it over to Sarah right now.
Thank you, Darren.
All right. Thank you, Aditi, also for being so brave and showing your portfolio for us and everyone else. I'm going to start off with the layout issue because I'm actually on a laptop and I'm still seeing it. So one recommendation is maybe to just, use the Google Chrome Inspect and see how it'll look like at different resolutions. And that might be helpful if you don't have access to different screen sizes. But yeah, jumping right in, I do really appreciate as well, to echo what Darren said, that you start off with the problem and you lay it out extremely clearly. And then you also provide, the questions that you were asking yourself when you were solutioning. And so that really helped me set the stage for what to expect as I'm going down the page. Personally, I've noticed that this has become a bit of a trend, the inserting of the methodology. Because it's such a prime real estate and it's at the top of the page, I personally don't find it very useful because I think also oftentimes, companies have different ways of doing things and processes. And the way that I view things like, like a sprint methodology is these are all guidelines and you should, adapt it to whatever works best for your team. And so I would actually think about focusing, this space on the goals, just calling back to what Darren was saying. I think the product goals and the long-term goals are things that are particularly important, especially when thinking about the product and the business itself. I loved as well that you had the key findings. It was very easy for me to find. And so I could read those bullet points and understand immediately sort of what your thought process was and the way that you were thinking about moving forward. And then in terms of the process that you had below, I felt like all of these storyboards and the sketches, I would want to be able, to also click on them and to see them in a little more detail, just so I can get a better understanding of what your thought process is. And the one thing that I wanted to call out as well is that for your prototypes, for me, at least when I hover over it, I see a cursor hand, which suggests to me that I can click on it and expand it, but clicking on it doesn't actually do anything. And so that's one thing that that might just be a bug for all of your, your GIFs or your videos, whichever format that you have them in. Yeah, and then going further down, I really, really appreciated that you called out limit categories, trust and safety, ID verification as things that you were considering as you were designing. I noticed on your initial homepage, you called out the fact that you really care about ethical design. And so this also gives me a window into the things that you think about and the things that you care about when you design, and as well as how you want to move through the world as a designer. So really appreciated sort of the detail that you put into that, and obviously the thought that you put into that. With the features portion, I would have liked to be able to explore maybe the prototype on my own. And once again, I was, trying to click on these in order to, get access to the prototype. And so maybe providing, the screens themselves so that people can just look at it themselves, or allowing the user to go into the prototype from here. And then finally, I really appreciate as well that you had this learning and outcomes section where you called out the things that you learned about the process itself, but then as well as, how you iterated on the product. So yeah, very strong, very clear storytelling. I would just, clean up those tiny UX things throughout the case study, and I think it will be really strong. So yeah, I'll hand it off now to Victoria.
Okay. I really like your portfolio. I think it's very clear. I think it's got a really great personality. I am going to go through again. I've been doing this on my own Chrome browser, so I've taken a look at some of the projects as well as some of the pages. I like that everything is like spaced really nicely. I feel like I'm able to read without being overwhelmed. I like the little subtle animations everywhere. The case studies, everything. I think the color is all consistent all throughout. I think it's very important to pay attention to those details that we often take for granted. The play is kind of like Maggie's. It gives you your personality and it makes you memorable. I might not remember your name. I might not remember exactly what your portfolio looked like, but I'm going to remember these beautiful art pieces that you've put on your portfolio. And I think they also tie in with how your portfolio looks and your aesthetic and your personality. I also like your story. I think it's really quite fun and quite interesting that you've included the animations. Again, when I'm looking at portfolios, I'm not just looking for the type of work that you do and whether or not you know Figma. I'm also looking for what kind of person are you? If I'm going to be working side by side with you, I want to make sure that you're a good person. My old mentor back in the day, he had one rule: no jerks, but he didn't use the word jerks. And so I like to keep it the same way. I don't want anybody that's a jerk on my team. I want people that are friendly and that have a sense of humor. And I feel like it comes through in your portfolio. It also, I really love these little facts about you. I'm not going to mention the spacing, it's been mentioned before. I like that you're a plant mom, you're a gamer, and you love to swim, but you don't swim really well. Like, I love that. I love knowing a little bit more about you beyond your experience, beyond your case studies. And then the contact, let's see. So this is actually something that I was going to recommend. So the contact on all of the pages just brings me back down, because that, let me move the chat box out of the way. That's exactly where the let's connect, say hello is. But I believe the other two portfolios that we looked into tonight just have like a separate contact page. You can do that. You can also just have the link like go directly to my email inbox, or even have your email somewhere presented. What I mean by that is like written out, whatever your email is. So let's say I'm gonna open the case study. Which one have I been looking at? I think I actually I looked into this one. Again, I'm not going to mention the spacing, but I like it. Right up front, I just want to know, I've never heard of this e-commerce company. I want to know what it is without thinking too much about it, right? And I think you provide that information upfront very clearly so that you kind of ground me. Okay, the timeline, I got it. Okay, oh, okay, you're a co-founder. Like all of this information is just to ground me. If I'm looking at a lot of resumes, if I'm looking at a lot of portfolios, if I'm looking at a lot of case studies, like I don't want to think. I just want to kind of read, kind of get the gist of it, and then continue scrolling down. I really, really like this section. And I know that we have looked at another case study just prior to this. I actually like that all of your sections are more or less the same in all of them. This was one of the questions. Should all of the case studies, how should they be consistent? That's exactly how they should be consistent. There should be a problem section. There should be an intro to the project or to the company. There should be, this is what happened, this is what I've done. And the solution, and then maybe the pretty design. So it kind of be consistent with the amount of information that you have. I love this problem because there is this really great book that I recommend everybody gets. It's called Don't Make Me Think. Basically, people do not read a lot online. And by putting all of these problems down as simple sentences, not only here, but throughout your case study, I understand what the problem is without even really having to read. I just kind of pick up the keywords. I'm going to say the same thing I said previously, which is the one thing I would be mindful of is putting images with copy because they're very difficult or impossible to read on a mobile device. They're also not accessible. And today is the Global Accessibility Day, so I must mention that. Yeah, and they're just, I know that you've done a lot of work, but it's just it kind of can go missing there. But I also like that you've pulled out a lot of the information on the site. Again, I like the consistency, everything is spaced out. Like I feel like I'm having breathing space, looking and scrolling down and learning about your case study. The persona. So I know that because I looked at another case study that you've also done a redesign of H&M.com. And another question that somebody put in the chat is, are personas even important? And I will answer that by, they are to an extent. I don't personally use personas in my day-to-day with my client projects, but we certainly know and understand who the users and what the demographic is of whatever it is that we're designing. So even though we might not be talking about Bob, the persona that we've created in a lab, this imaginary person, we do rely on grounding everything we put together in not only on research, but this imaginary, I work on JetBlue, so this imaginary traveler, for example. That being said, I would question you, how did you come up with this persona? How did you name this persona? Like, how did you actually figure out the pain points and the opportunities that this persona presents? You know what I'm going to say about the image with a lot of content on it? I think it's great. I think it actually could be quite much bigger. I think if it took its own space on the line in a section, it might be even readable on mobile, but again, not accessible. Competitor analysis. So I've noticed this in a lot of the case studies that you have. You don't actually tell me who the competitors are, and I would love to know. It looks like you've done extensive research, but I want to know, what are those companies? What are they called? Maybe what are their logos? Again, I might not be familiar, but I think it just validates the point that you've done a lot of research. So solution, I love, as Darren mentioned previously on other portfolios, I love the color block. It kind of makes me pause and like, okay, now we're in the solution land. So what did she come up with? The design is great. I do wonder, because I've noticed this on the H&M one as well. And actually the previous ones that I forgot to mention with the two previous people that we've looked into, the design system can be so much more beyond this. It's more than just a logo and a typeface. It is like the spacing of everything. I know that, for example, in the design solution, again, because I've looked into this prior, you have this beautiful purple color on the call to action to buy something, but it's not on the brand style. So it's like this very vibrant purple color, but it's not included on here. So what's going on there? Like those are the kind of like the attention to detail that I would be looking for. But overall, I think this is really fantastic. I also love this section at the very end. Forgive me for having the sirens drive by if you guys can hear it. I love knowing what you have learned from the case study. I think I consider that one of the most important things. We're always learning something. We always look back on the case studies and in our lives as well. What could we have done differently now that we have gone through with this case study, for example? But overall, I think it's a wonderful portfolio and great case studies. And it's obvious you put in a lot of attention to those details, maybe, not the spacing, but we'll give you some hints. So hopefully you'll work on those.
Thank you, Victoria. Aditi,
Yes.
do you have any additional quick questions or comments before we move on to Q&A?
Well, first of all, I'm really thankful to all the panel members, Sarah, Victoria, Darren, all of you gave me really good feedback, what I was really looking for. I know there are a few things that I should be working on, but I like that, at least I have done this case studies, I have revised them recently, and few things that hence the alignment has not been the way I wanted, but yes, I'm in a work in progress. I will be iterating my portfolio next. In terms of question, I do have a question. So I see now there is for the entry-level UX designer, I'm hearing a lot of saturation has been there. So how can I stand out from there? I heard some people saying that you should learn coding to stand out, but what can I really stand out about?
I can kick this off. So the advice that I give all of my mentees and the people that I speak to is to understand. I think that the best thing that you can do for yourself is to understand what your strengths are. And oftentimes for career switchers in particular, there's this anxiety about I don't have the resume. But I think Maggie, for instance, is a great example of coming from a background of public health. Product roles are not only in FANG companies or startups or the tech world. We need designers everywhere. We need designers in health tech. We need designers in polytech. We need designers in all of these different fields. And you all have a really specific background that you can lean into and understand, what is the story that you're selling? And then also, to Michael's point before about finding organizations that you can do work for, if you have a background in healthcare, if you have a background in specific, industries, that is all incredibly valuable because as designers, we do work with very, very different stakeholders, and having that understanding is a strength. And so I would lean into, what your own skill sets are and what brings you passion, and looking for a way to get into the field that way.
No, that's great. Thank you. Yes.
Thank you, Sarah. Also, Aditi, just to add to that, of course, I'm biased, but basically real experience is, as Sarah was mentioning as well, is kind of one of the key parts, right? We're basically really believe in first identifying what it is that employers are looking for. What is it that employers are looking for, right? And then just making yourself better and better and better and better, right? It's basically this one huge mistake that so many people make, right? You remember that if you saw that product analogy, right? So your skills and experience as a product and marketing and job search as marketing and sales. So basically the biggest mistake people make is just not building a product that is strong enough, right? Then you can market and sell all you want, but it's just not going to be very effective, right? And if you look at most job descriptions, we can actually send you that training video. It's like a long 2-hour training video, but it can save you months or years in the long run potentially, right? And it's basically about how we've done lots of research, right? And you just need to build yourself up, right? You just need to have those real client case studies. You need to have the softer skills that you can actually showcase on your resume and your portfolio, right? Let you collaborate with the team, right? And then once you build yourself up, you end up noticing that there's like much less competition at that level already, right? So instead of being one of those people who are just, go the conventional route and just do a little bit of learning and then just start mass applying and do that for like forever, and just get a ton of rejection, just build yourself up, right? And then you'll have much better basically conversion, right, of all those applications into actual interviews, right, and to offers. So that's just something to highlight quickly.
Thank you, Michael.
Awesome. So this is awesome. So Aditi, thank you so much for being one of the candidates whose portfolios we reviewed today. This was great. So thank you guys so much for all these great insights. So I do want to take, we have a few questions in the Q&A tab. So just wanted to briefly address some of those. So Patricia is asking, how important is it to have your own, so it should be a pretty quick question, right? So how important is it to have your own URL? Is it okay if it includes Wix sites, the free version? Thank you. I can just provide very quick opinion on that, and then let the actual panelists provide the more in-depth insights, right? I think it's important, right? Because it just makes you look much more professional, right? It's just, and it probably costs like what, $5 or $10 or $15 a month or something like that. But whenever I see that wixsite.com and then that thing, whatever you call it, the ribbon showing up at the top, it just looks, maybe it's just me personally, but it just looks less professional. So I'll let others chime in really quick before we take the next question.
I think it looks much more professional if you have your own URL. I don't think they're very expensive. I don't know. I've since really been paying for mine for like the last 10 years. I don't even know. It's just automatic. But I also think that if you pay for like more than 2 years, I think it considerably lowers in price. But also be mindful of the fact you don't want to be perceived. I think if you use anything for free, or if you have anything that doesn't look like very professional, be mindful of how you look in the field, in the group of other job candidates. If other people are applying for the same role and they've, I don't know, maybe put in a little bit more effort, or I know that it costs a little bit of money, but paid for their own domain or have put in those little details into their website, I think it makes them look a little bit more professional.
Thank you, Victoria. So let's take another question. What tools, so AM is asking, what tools do you guys suggest to use for portfolios? We can just cover this very quickly in terms of tools. I mean, I can just summarize like Squarespace, Wix, they're like probably two of the most common ones. Webflow is like much more, it's basically a steeper learning curve, but it's much more flexible in terms of what you can build. Do you guys have any other tips?
Simplest Labs. But I think, and I love Simplest Labs. They just launched Simplest Labs 6. It lives on top of Squarespace. It's gorgeous. And it is a huge amount of creatives use that. But I think what's even more important, is not the layout or the content management system that you use. It's how you lay out your project. And I think lay it out in Sketch, lay it out in XD, lay it out in Figma, get whatever the application you use, get the storytelling down first. And if that is clear, then you could actually use almost any of these, whether it's Wix, Squarespace, or WordPress template, to really just tell your story, but get the story down first. And then it'll be a lot easier to use just about any application.
So Desiree is asking, so This presentation is great. Thank you for putting this on. My question is regarding the balance of UX and UI in a case study for a UX research position. Is having very solid research but average UI going to diminish my chances of getting hired? I struggle with knowing how I would like to appear visually, but don't quite have the skills set yet needed to produce the cool UI I see all over Dribbble and such.
I can answer this. I've worked as a UX researcher and been on hiring panels for researchers. The UI is not going to be a ding against you. That's not what you're being hired for. The most important thing is that you understand UX because it's about your understanding of the users, the experience, and then also being able to ask questions. And so I would not worry about that at all as as something that will be held against you. I think even designers in the room are going to be very, very thoughtful about that and aware of what your skill sets are going to be.
Thank you, Sarah. Darren, I think you started saying something too quickly. Did you?
Yeah, I was just about to say, something like Squarespace, for the lack of better things, they have type hierarchy, they have templates, they have drag and drop blocks of content, and that actually will help you visually. It's really well thought out, and that can actually help leverage some of your, how you visually present your work. But that's just a thought.
Thank you, Darren. And we will have to wrap up in a couple of minutes, but I do want to take a couple of very quick questions. So Patricia is also asking, so a lot of Medium articles mention that personas aren't used often in the real world. Is it true? I'm applying for junior positions. Is it better to still include personas? I know Victoria started talking about that a little bit. So do you guys have any insights on this?
You want to grab that, Victoria?
Okay, I'll continue talking about personas. Again, in the real world, there have been instances where I've put together a persona for a client project. That being said, getting a persona to be something that is used across your team or across the entire company is not an easy task. That being said, I would much rather spend the time on finding out what the problem, this demographic of people that are using your products, who are those people? What is their age groups? Where are they located? I don't really care what kind of music they like and what their favorite, if they like Adidas or Nike, makes no difference to me. I would much rather know the demographics. There is ample and there's so much research on so many industries, on so many competitors out there if you just know where to look. And the place to start is Google. If you Google anything, you guys you're gonna find a lot of demographics information. There will be some guessing along the way, especially if what I'm talking about are projects that you're making on your own, case studies that you're working on your own. But you can still have a really good grounding and problems, pain points, anything else of that sort should all be coming from your research. This should not be coming out of thin air. So yes, personas, kind of useful, kind of not. I think it's much more useful to talk about somebody in general.
I have a dream of bringing on Alan Cooper sometime to talk about defending personas. At
Darren,
some
do you
point.
disagree? I saw you go off of mute. Do you disagree?
No, I totally agree. In fact, where I work, we have strategists that actually, do all of that work, and then they actually tell us who we're solving for. So it's important to know who you're solving for, the demographics. But I personally, I could say maybe once in my career, or maybe twice, I've actually had to create a persona. Other than that, there's a team that's actually dedicated to do that. So, and maybe if you're working in smaller startups or something like that, you may have to be a little scrappy where you wear a lot of different hats. And that might be the case, but in terms of your portfolio, it's really who you're solving for. And I think that's the biggest thing. And I agree with Victoria.
I also like really fast. I feel really passionate about personas right at this moment in my life. I will also say that, so I work in an agency. We have a range of different clients, and the one word that we try to stay away from when speaking to our clients is the word user. So I've mentioned JetBlue earlier. We use travelers. When travelers are going to the airport, when travelers are booking their flight, et cetera, and so on and so forth. So it's not exactly a persona, but it's kind of stepping away, because user could be anyone ever. A little child is not going to be booking a flight to Mexico City, for example. So that's something else to consider.
Thank you, Victoria. So let's do one more. If an app is, so Amy Kim is asking, if an app is redesigned, is it beneficial to show before and after images?
I could actually say yes. When apps is before and after, and it's not really the before and after. It's really about going in there and do you do a heuristics audit? Do you identify some of those key things that you're solving for? And that's why you're showing the previous screen. Identify the areas where was a customer, right? I love the fact you say traveler, but or whomever is interacting with the app. What were their pitfalls? What were their pain points? What were you solving for? And that's why you might show that before and after. So you can really just kind of surface one, the heuristics audit or the things that you've identified, and then alternatively, like how you solve for that and where those key moments in the solve. So.
Thank you, Darren. All right, thank you guys so much. This is great. So hope you guys enjoyed the event and got some great tips on your portfolios. So talking about portfolios, as promised earlier, so let me quickly tell you guys about the program that we're running, since some of you might be curious. It might be a great opportunity for some of you to not just build an amazing portfolio with real clients work, but also get all the crucial career prep necessary to actually land a UX job, right? So basically what BeginX is, it's a part-time UX career accelerator program with real social impact client projects that helps people transition into UX without quitting their jobs. So far we've run multiple cohorts, helped probably over 120 people transition into UX, and alumni of the program have been hired by lots of great companies like SiriusXM, Coach, ABC News, Facebook, Meta, JP Morgan, Google, many others. The advisors and mentors are also UX practitioners from also companies like Google, IDEO, Amex, The Economist, many others. Who the program is best for? The program is the best fit for people who know UX basics or come from a design, research, creative, tech, or related background and look to transition into UX in one of the most efficient and affordable ways and without quitting their current jobs. So we're also pretty selective and look for motivated and committed team players. What you gain after completing this program is you build not just hard skills, but also critical softer skills, real experience with a robust portfolio, expand your professional network, and get ready to actually land a UX job. And in fact, the grads have done so well that we now offer a money-back guarantee. So you basically land a UX job or you get your tuition back, plus an extra $200 on top of that. So if it sounds like you may be a good candidate, you can learn more on beginx.com. So we frequently run different types of events. So we'll keep you guys updated about the upcoming events and share resources via our newsletter that is usually sent every few weeks or so. Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. And thank you to our wonderful panelists for taking their time to join us and provide all the valuable insights. It was a huge pleasure to have you here. If anyone has any other last minute questions, we might hang on for like maybe 2 more minutes or so, whoever can, to take this.
I just want to say that it's very exciting, Vanessa. I see your comment in the chat that you feel excited to work in your portfolio. Keep at it. We didn't look at it, but I'm excited for you. I can't wait to see it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's actually a huge roadblock for many people, right? That's why this event is so popular. It's so that's really great to hear.
I will also add, as always, your portfolios and your case studies are never truly done. You'll always look at somebody else's portfolio and say, oh no, I should have done that. Oh, I could do this. Like, you're never truly satisfied. It's always a work in progress. So be mindful of that.
I see Mark's question. Should we try not to use the word user in our personas? Well, it's the same thing as Victoria was saying. She uses travelers. Where I work, we are told not to use user and say customers. As the customer moves into the journey, or instead of versus user. So I would avoid that. Make it more relevant to if it's in fintech, or maybe, as someone who's investing, or so try to just anchor it into what you're solving for, what the product's about.
All right. So with that said, thank you guys so much for joining. I know you're probably ready to get some rest. All right, it was a pleasure to have everyone here.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.
Thank
Good night,
you for
everybody.
joining.
Hi, everyone. Good night.
Thanks for
Have a good
joining.
night.